Okay, so this lesson will be about the vowels in Arabic, right? And the different kinds of vowels and what they're derived from, what they mean, how you read them, right? And if you don't know how to read Arabic already, that's fine. This shouldn't be very, very difficult. But if it is, then you can at me or ping me in the Arabic channel, right? And I will give you some help. So let me share my screen. Okay. You can see this PowerPoint, right? Hello? You can see the PowerPoint? Okay. So the accents, the name for them in Arabic is harakat, right? And you can see in this word, right? These are the letters in Arabic, the ones right here. But these marks right on top, these ones, are the harakat, right? And I will guide you through some of the different types of them, right? It does get more complex, but this is definitely a beginner level lesson on harakat. So, there are 4 accents or harakat in Arabic. They mostly serve as shorter versions of the Arabic vowels. They are commonly called short vowels because we already have our vowels that are actual letters in the Arabic alphabet, but then there are these vowels that you can put on top of letters, right? You can put on top of letters to guide how it is pronounced, even when the word doesn't have a vowel. And I mean a long vowel, like a letter, right? So, for example, in the word that we see here, this is ha, ra, ka, right? And this doesn't have any vowels in it, right? And I mean long vowels, right? But we still pronounce them a certain way because of the short vowels here, right? So these guide how we pronounce it, because this could be hurrika, but it is haraka, right? So this is read a very specific way, despite it not having a long vowel, right? Most basic forms of words in Arabic do not include a vowel, so that's where the purpose of the accents are the most obvious, right? This word does have a long vowel, which is this one, right? It's it's alif, right? So it would be harakat, right? Give me a second. So and like the names for these vowels suggests, these accents on top here are the shorter versions of the long vowels here, like this one, for example, in this word, right? So this would be, if this was written with a vowel, right, it would look like this, because in Arabic the letters connect to each other, right? So this, which looks like this, just to make it clearer, this would be ha, and this would be ha, right? So this is a long vowel and this is a short vowel, meaning that you basically just pronounce the for a very short amount of time. And there's other different types of accents that aren't just a or u or e, right? Because there's 3 that exist, which is so let's use ha as an example. This is ha. And this is hu, right? And this is he. Right? And then there's a 4th one, which means that there is no vowel. So it's just right? So it's just ha, right? So you would just say you wouldn't say ha, hu, he, any of that. It means that there is no vowel. But there are other different types that of harakat other than these 4. Like the shadda, which means the consonant is doubled. So it's hard to give an example by just showing the letter. So let's look at a different word. Right? So there are 3 accents present here. 2 meaning that there are no vowels, and the shadda. Right? And basically this means that it is doubled. So this would be ash-shams. You see how it is pronounced like there are 2 sh sounds, right? Ash-shams. Ash-shams. It sounds like there are 2 of the letter, and this is just a more convenient way of writing it rather than writing like the letter combined with another letter, right? And then having one with the sukoon and then another one with the other one, right? This is just a more convenient way of writing it. And they are usually combined with one of these 4 here, right? And how that would be written is if it means there's no vowel, you don't write anything, right? You don't write anything. But if the second letter, like is shown here, this is 2 letters, has an a, right, then you write it like this, right above. But if the second letter has a o, right, it means that the second letter is read as sho or shu, then it's written like this, right? But if it is e, then it's put under here, right? It's not put in the same way like this one as we see here, whereas right under the letter it shows as right under the shadda sign, which is this sign right above the letter. So it will be like this, using ha as an example, right? This is just a more convenient way of writing 2 letters. So yeah. And then we're gonna talk about the basic accents in Arabic in more detail. So this is their names, right? So each one has its own name. Fatha or Fatha, if that's better for you. Kasra, which is the one that's under here. Dhamma, which is this one. And Sukoon, which is the circle. Right? And they serve as shorter versions of the 3 vowels, the long vowels. Alif, Waw, Ya. So let me write these bigger for you. Right? And so this first one is the long version of the fatha, like I showed you before with the example of ha. So this is ha, and this is ha, right? You extend it for longer. So the kasra is the shorter version of the ya, right? So let's look at ha again. So this is he, and this is he. It's much longer, right? You extend the E sound for a longer time. And the last one is the Waw, right? Which is the longer version of the Dhamma, right? You can see that it is the same sign, right? They look similar. So let's use ha as an example again. Right, so this is hu, and this is hu. You see how the for the long vowel, the sound is longer. That's why we call it a long vowel. And then the fourth one, it indicates that the consonant to which it is attached to is not followed by a vowel. So, like this example here, this is the b sound, right? So this is ba, b, bu, and this is just b, right? There is no vowel attached to it. Yeah? What's your question? No, it's not. It's just another consonant, right? Yeah. So it's you're welcome. It's similar to the b sound, where it's not a vowel, right? It's just another letter that gets manipulated by the vowel, right? Whether it be short or long. And then this is just I hope you can read this. I'm writing it on a laptop, but yeah. And the names of these short vowels refer to the shape of your mouth when pronouncing them, right? So the word for fatha comes from the word fataha, which means to open, because when you pronounce the a sound or the a sound, you open your mouth a bit more than you would just pronouncing the letter normally, right? And the dhamma, right? The name for it comes from the word dhamma, right? And it's spelled a different way in Arabic, but it's pronounced the same, which basically means to dim, to close, to shut, to lower. And I mean, like, in the use of, like, to lower the brightness, for example, like that. right? And it refers to how when you pronounce the oo sound, you close your mouth a little bit more, right? You round it out and you almost close your mouth. And then the word for sukoon, the word sukoon, refers to how your mouth is static. You just pronounce the letter, you don't do anything extra, right? So you just pronounce the letter, you don't open your mouth or close your mouth a little bit more to pronounce it, you just pronounce the letter. So why are these vowels important, specifically for new learners? They are important because changing an accent can change the whole meaning of the word. So even if just one is off, one is different, it can mean an entirely different word that is completely unrelated to the other word, that is almost identical to it. There are many words in Arabic that are spelled the same, referring to the letters, but if you just change one accent, it is completely different. So one of the only ways for new learners to tell the difference between each word is by the accents. But as you progress with learning Arabic and you get better and you do it for longer, the process of knowing what the word is gets more intuitive. You don't really need the accents anymore. You just know what they mean based off of the context. Let me show you. So these are just some words that use the same letters, but you can only tell them apart by accents. So this is ka, ta, ba, right? So you can see that it includes all fathas, right? Ka, ta, ba. And this word means to write. It means to write, right? But if you look at this other word, kutub, so it's spelled the same. You can see that the main letters are exactly the same, but the short vowels are completely different. So this is a dhamma, sukoon, right? So this is pronounced as kutub, which means books, right? So this shows that even if you just change the accents, it is a completely different word. So let's look at another example. Dhahaba. So this is fatha, fatha, fatha. Dhahaba, which means to go, or he went. Right? But then if you look at this word, it is identical in spelling, right? It's the exact same letters, but the accents are different. And this example is different from the last one because only one accent is different, the accent on the ba. So if you see, this is fatha, fatha, and then sukoon. So this is dhahaba, and this is dhahab, which means gold, right? And these words are completely unrelated. Like, at least these words were slightly related, but these words are completely unrelated, right? And this just shows you that if you even change one of them, it can possibly mean an entirely different thing. A completely different thing. Gold and to go or he went are not even slightly close to each other. So let's look at the doubled accents. So we're now getting to more advanced territory. So these are the same basic accents but doubled, right? And what it is called in Arabic is tanween. Or as you can see here, tanween. Tanween is added to the end of Arabic nouns, adjectives, and adverbs for the fatha only. Right? Adverbs for the fatha only, which is this one. Remember? The one that you put on top of the letter here. In many world languages, nouns and adjectives are marked for definiteness, right? So that is, they are either definite or specific, or indefinite, or don't refer to a specific thing. Like in English, if you were to say a cake, it just means cake in general, just a cake, right? It's just any cake. Or an apple, it refers to just any apple. You don't know if it's a specific apple or some random apple, right? But if I were to say the cake and the apple, right, you would know that I'm referring to a specific thing, right? And there are many other languages that have this, right? Like in French, un, ein, and eine in German, right? Tanween is also an indefinite marker of nouns and adjectives in Arabic, right? So in Arabic, we have one of those that refers to, this is just a thing, right? It's just any of this thing. It's not a very specific thing. But the difference between Arabic and other languages is that other languages, it is marked using a letter, right? Using a letter or a word, right? But in Arabic, it's just marked using an accent, right? By using tanween. And it varies according to its position in the sentence. Like, it varies on whether the word is a subject or an object in the sentence, right? And all of that. But I actually want to come back, right? And this is basically what it looks like, right? And it will be the same like that. But then for the fourth one, which is this one, there is no double of this because it means that there is no accent, right? So you can't double it because that means nothing, right? And I want to specifically go on about this one, right, which is the doubled fatha, right? Because this tanween is special. Instead of just being right above a letter like for other tanweens, in tanween al-fatah, right, tanween al-fatah, you would need to add an alif at the end of the word, right, to support it, right? So it's not just present like that on top of a letter, right? Or it would be only present at the end of the word, sorry. So like that. This would close to what it would look like, right? That's not how it would look, right? Because in Arabic you would need to add an extra alif, which is the a letter, right? So instead of looking like this, because this is wrong, you don't write it like that unless it's in very specific cases, right? For a ha, you have to write it like this. You have to add an alif to support it, right? Except for two letters. You have to do this for all letters in Arabic except for just two, which is the ta marbuta, which would be present like this, or like this, and the hamza, which is this. God, hold on. Which is this. Close, okay? It's close. Right? Or this, this. All different forms of the hamza. Right? These, you don't add an extra alif. You just put it on top of it. So what that would look like is this would be the hamza, right? And you would just add it normally, right? Like you would any other tanween, right? Like how you would add tanween dhamma, tanween kasra, right? You would just add it onto the letter, and you would not add on an extra alif. You just add it on normally, right? And same for this one, you just add it on normally. So for this one, you can see different examples of the words, of different words that you could add this to. So this is kitab. Let me right, and then this would be kitaban. Oh God. Right, so we added the tanween fatah at the end of the word, but you need to add an alif. Right, you see the alif here? You would need to add it for this tanween. But as you can see here, for ma and ma'an, ma, and then ma'an. It's the same, you don't add an alif at the end because it doesn't need one. Right? And then, for example, and then let me bring up an example for ta marbuta. Tufahatan. It means an apple. Ma means water, this means book. As you can see here, this means apple, right? You don't need to add an alif, right, to turn it into tufahatan, right? Because how you would write it if you had to add an alif would be like this, right? Because if you add a letter at the end of, if you write a letter after ta marbuta, it turns into just a normal ta. But this is not how it works in Arabic. This is the more correct way to write it, right? Is to just add it on top normally. So now let's focus on the shadda, right? This is one of the most important ones. In Arabic class here in the UAE, my teacher told us that when writing essays and all of that, we didn't need to add any other harakat, but all that was really, really important to add, no matter what, was the shadda. So this has a higher importance than the other harakat. right? Because this determines how something is pronounced, and it determines a lot more stuff. It determines how we pronounce the or L, right? It determines how we pronounce it, right? So if the first letter of the word after L has, like, the first letter of it starts with a shadda, like the example that I brought up before, shams, right? How you would pronounce it is ash-shams, right? You don't pronounce the lam in there because the first letter, the sheen, has a shadda. You don't pronounce the letter, right? And I think I'm gonna go more into this in a different lesson if you really want me to teach it, but yeah. It determines how the L is pronounced, right? And if the first letter of the next word, right, has a shadda, you don't pronounce the lam, but if it doesn't, then you do pronounce it, like in the word al-qamar, which means, this means sun, and this means moon. This doesn't have a shadda, there's no shadda here, right? So this would be al-qamar, right? And because this has a shadda on it, you don't pronounce the lam. But here you do pronounce it because this doesn't have a shadda on it. And, right, so there are certain letters that if a word starts with that letter, then it determines whether or not it has a shadda and lam, right? But I'll go into that on a different lesson, right? And so that's why it's important, because it determines whether or not you pronounce the lam in L, right? And yeah, so for example, if I didn't write this, the shadda, right? And so there's no shadda here, so that just means that it will be al-shams, which is the incorrect way to pronounce it, right? And so for example, let me say this, I added a shadda here incorrectly. That would mean that I would pronounce this word incorrectly, because like I said, shadda means that you don't pronounce the lam. So this would not be al-qamar, this would be al-qamar, which is incorrect, right? And also it's very hard to pronounce, right? And there's a rule for which words, right, which letters have a shadda, which means all of that. There's a rule for it that I will go into in another lesson, right? And another example of it is in the name of it, right? Shadda. So this is just 3 letters, right? Sha, da, and then ta marbuta, right? So, but you know, as you could hear while I was pronouncing it, while I was reading it, that you pronounce it like there are 2 das, right? So it's not shadda, it's shadda, so it's doubled. So that's another good example, is in the name of the haraka in and of itself. So now let's look at the long Arabic vowels, right? So the first long vowel is also the first letter of the Arabic alphabet, alif. So you basically read it as though it changes in within in certain contexts, most of the time it is pronounced as It is a long version of the fatha, which is this one, but on top, right? So it would be on top of the letter. So bringing back the ha, right? And a perfect example of how it sounds usually is in the word sat, right? And an example in Arabic would be nam, which means sleep or to sleep. Can you give me just 1 second? I'll bring the charger for the laptop. So as I was saying, right, this is pronounced as yeah. And like I previously mentioned, this is the longer version of the fatha. So this would be ha, this would be ha, right? So it's just longer. And then the second long vowel is the wow. It is represented as oo, right? This is how it would be, the pronunciation of it would be written in English, same as here. It is the long version of the dhamma. So this is what the dhamma looks like, and this is what the wow looks like, right? So same with alif and fatha, you just pronounce it for a longer amount of time. So this would be hu, this would be hu. A perfect example of how it sounds usually is in the English word spoon, and an example in Arabic would be kura, which means ball. Right? Though, like I mentioned, these long vowels change in context, in different contexts. So this usually is pronounced like in the word kura, it's just oo. But if you look at the word, this word, right, it has the letter, but the letter is pronounced in a different way. This means or, and how it is pronounced is ow. You say ow or o, right? And it is not pronounced like in spoon, right? You don't pronounce the word spoon like that. This is pronounced as like this, ow, right? And yeah, so in different contexts it changes, in different words it's pronounced differently, though most of the time you will be fine with pronouncing it as oo, right? Yeah. And then the third one is the ya, right, which is written like that. So let's write it here. And it is the longer version of the kasra, which is this one right here. So this would be hi, this would be he. So like the rest of them, you just pronounce it for a longer amount of time. It just stretches on. You just stretch it. And an example of how it sounds is in the English word deep. E, he, deep. And an example in Arabic would be fil, which means elephant. Right? So yeah, it's just the longer version of the kasra, like I said. So now I want you guys to practice, right? I want to see how, with the information that you that I have given you now, hopefully you understood it very well, right? And this is just some light practice. Don't worry about getting it right or wrong, because that's not the main point. It's not the main point to be right. The main point is to just try. So, who wants to go first? To try and pronounce some of this. Okay. So, let me pick a letter that is pretty easy. It's not some complex Arabic letter. Okay, ba, this one. I want you to read this. This one? Yes, that is perfect. Do you want to do another one? Okay. Do you know this letter? Yes. Yes, that's perfect. Does anybody else want to go? Try? No one else wants to try? Okay. How about this one? Do you know how to read the letter? Okay, just try from memory. What do you think this letter is? This one. This one. This one. No, that is wrong. Ra is this one. Ra is this one. This one is, yes, it is dal. So, can you try and read it with, yes. Do you want to do ra? Okay, perfect. Does anybody else want to do it? Anybody else wants to try? Okay. Yeah. Yeah, since nobody's really participating, I think I'm just gonna have you guys read. Yeah, okay, so, yeah. Whoever wants to go, they can try and read all that is here. Every single one of this. So who wants to try and read the entire thing first? Okay, go ahead. From right to left, remember? Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. Okay, and then this one. Yes. Okay, this one. Yes, this one. Can you say that again? Kha. Kha, is that what you were trying to say? Okay. Okay. Try it. Yes, this one. Okay, this one. Mm-hmm. Yes. 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 Can you repeat that? Yes, it's sa. Yeah. Sa. Okay, this one. This one. No, this is sa. You were right the first time. This one is the hardest one. You can do it. You're saying this letter. This is a bit different. It's the. Yeah. So can you try it again? This one. Ta. Yes, it's ta. Okay. You're saying ta. Can you try and, it's ta. Ta, ti, tu. Ta, ti, tu. Yes. And then this one. So this is a combination of this letter and this letter. So this is da, and the. So this is the, right? It's somewhere in the middle. Yes. Next. This one. No, this is this one. This one is ah. Here. No, gha is this one, this next one. This one is ah. Yes. Yes, and then this one. Very French. This one. This one. Mhm. 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 Yes. You're welcome. Okay. So, does anybody else want to try and read the whole thing? Okay. Go ahead. Start from here. Remember, right to left. Mhm. 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 Wait, the last one, did you say zazizu? It's the, right? Kind of like you're saying the, right? Like the apple. The, yeah, so it's the, yes. Okay, can you try it again? Okay. So back on this one. This is za. Do you know this one? Are you saying shoe? Like, it's sa, like S. Yeah, saw. Ta, yeah. And then this one. The, yes. It's not ga, gigu, it's ra, right? Yes. This one. No, this is qa, qi, qu, right? It's pretty difficult. It's qa, qi, qu. This is? No. Ka, ki, ku, yes. This one. This one. This is me. You can't see it, but yeah. This is na, ni, nu. Yes. And this one. Perfect. Thank you. Okay. Does anybody else want to do it? Want to try? Does anybody else want to try? Okay, so no one else. So, that's basically the end of the lesson. Right? So if you want, we could just stay and chat for a little bit. Right? We could stay and we could chat for a little bit, and we could, yes? This is for, it's still like very beginner, but it's a bit more advanced because you have to already know some Arabic, like some letters. You have to already know what the letters are, and what they look like, how to read them, like what noise is for each letter, right? So you have to know that because it's just the accent, right? So like you can, hold on, yeah, wait, like you can see here, can you see this? Can you see my screen? Yeah, like you can see here, you have to already know the letters, right? These aren't all the letters, but you can't really add accents onto vowels, right? Except for this one, right? But yeah, you have to already know this to be able to read. You have to already know how to read slightly, so you have to know what the letters are, what sound they make, how to read them, right? How they look, right? Okay. I will be sharing this PowerPoint right on in lesson resources, right? So I'll be sending the PowerPoint after, right? But if you guys have any sort of questions, then you can ask me now, right? Well, shadda just means to double it, right? So you can even hear it with how you pronounce the word, right? Shadda, right? So you pronounce it like it's two words. Instead of saying shadda, it's shadda. There's two das in there, right? And that's how, yeah, that's how you pronounce it. It's basically like a short version. It's what the Arabs have created in order to make it easier, right? So instead of having to write two of the letters and having to do all of that, they just shortened it and turned it into an accent you put on top of a letter. You're welcome. Yeah. Well, those were just examples. I wasn't necessarily like talking about things that were really too complicated, but I understand how for somebody who's a beginner that can sound very, very complicated to them, right? Because you're bringing up things like stuff like the alphabet, and then already like you're getting into words, but I had to provide examples, right? I had to show it. Yeah. So does anybody else have any questions? Do you want me to repeat anything? Well, this is my first class, but I will be hoping, I'm hoping that I can do them once a week, or once a week or once every 2 weeks, right? Just as much as I can. But yeah, maybe I'll, if I'm feeling better on 1 week, right? Like if I'm feeling like I have stuff prepared for you guys, I might do an extra lesson per week, right? Like for example, 1 week just do 2 lessons. But this is my first one, so yeah. So does anybody else have another question? Can you repeat that? You sound very far away. I can't really hear you properly. So it is a, like for example, let's take ba, right? The ba. So it is ba, bu, bi, and then just b, right? Meaning that there is no accent. Yeah. You're welcome. Does anybody else have a question? Schwa. I don't know what a schwa is. I'm so sorry. No, because this is only present after a letter. So, yeah. Yes, it's after each letter, like how you pronounce it. So, like, yeah. So you see how in the word that you brought up, about, right? So if you look at the B and how the B is pronounced, you pronounce it as ba, right? About, right? So it's kind of the same way, except in English, you don't have accents, right? Most of the time, unless the word comes from like French or something, right? You don't have accents. The process is just more like you have grammar, a lot of grammar rules. Meanwhile, this is just a very visual way of showing it, you know? You're welcome. Does anybody else have a question? Or they want me to repeat a specific part? To get accustomed to the language, that's so because I teach modern standard Arabic, right, and since I'm a native speaker, I don't necessarily watch or see a lot of stuff in modern standard Arabic. So a lot of the examples I can give you are either in a specific dialect or they're classical Arabic, right? So Arabic used for poetry, for literature, any sort of literature, right? So that's still something that I have to really look for, right? So I bet what you're asking for is like how a lot of people, when you're learning a language, would suggest to watch TV shows in that language, listen to music in that language. Yeah. So, for communication, well, if you're a beginner, I wouldn't necessarily recommend talking to Arabs yet, right? Because your vocabulary is probably not very large, right? So if you try and talk to Arabs, you'll probably just start feeling bad, right? You wouldn't necessarily feel very good because it's just gonna, it's gonna be very confusing for you,